Chapter 1. The sun dipped towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange that reflected off the waters of Victoria Beach. I sat on the warm sand, watching my children play at the water's edge, their laughter carried on the salty breeze. This beach, with its iconic tower rising from the cliffside, held so many memories, both joyful and painful. As my family enjoyed our vacation in Laguna Beach, I found myself slipping into reflection. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a worn, yellowed newspaper clipping that I've carried with me for decades. The bold headline still had the power to make my breath catch. Laguna teenager commits suicide. My fingers traced the faded print of the Laguna Beach Independent article, feeling the weight of the words that had changed my life forever. The clinical description of that tragic morning. When police arrived, they found the dead youth, still in his underwear, lying in his bed, contrasted sharply with the vibrant life around me now. I glanced up at the towering cliffs that lined the beach, remembering countless afternoons spent here as a child, oblivious to the pain that would soon reshape our lives. The article's mention of the distraught woman who called the police brought back vivid memories of my mother's anguish. Next to the clipping lay another remnant of the past, a business card for the human equation, my mother's counseling practice, once located at 1550 South Coast Highway, just a short distance from where I now sat. The card, with Dr. Martine J. Robards' name, and the promise of counseling, consulting, evaluation, bridged the gap between my past and present, a tangible link to the professional legacy I've continued. My children's shouts of joy pulled me from my reverie. As I watched them splash in the waves, silhouetted against the setting sun, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Grief for the brother who never got to experience these simple pleasures. Gratitude for the life I've built. And a deep sense of purpose, knowing that my journey from that tragic day to this moment has shaped me into the therapist I am today. As I tucked the clipping and my mother's business card back into my wallet, a sense of purpose washed over me. The weight of these mementos, physical reminders of loss and legacy, suddenly felt like more than just personal tokens. They were pieces of a larger story, one that needed to be told. I watched my children laughing in the fading light, their joy a stark contrast to the pain captured in that yellowed newsprint. In that moment, I realized that my journey, from a traumatized boy on this very beach to the therapist I am today, could serve a greater purpose. This book, I decided, would be more than just my story. It would be a bridge between my past and my present, between my family's struggles and the challenges faced by countless others. By sharing my experiences, the raw pain of loss, the complexities of growing up in the shadow of tragedy, and the path that led me to help others heal, I could offer hope and understanding to those still finding their way through darkness. I stood up, brushing the sand from my clothes, and called to my children. As we gathered our things to head back to our vacation rental, I made a silent promise, not just to my family or myself, but to every reader who might find solace in these pages. I would honor the past, cherish the present, and use all I've learned to illuminate the path from trauma to healing. This book would be my testament to resilience, a toolkit for transformation, and a reminder that even from our deepest wounds, we can find the strength to grow, to heal, and to help others do the same. This beach, this clipping, this moment, they all tell a story of trauma and resilience, of loss and healing. It was time to share that story, not just for myself or my family, but for all those still struggling to find their way through the darkness to moments of light like this one. Hash the shattering of innocence from paradise to tragedy. The golden veneer of our seemingly perfect life began to crack during the summer of 1986. The warm, salt-tinged air of Laguna Beach, once a comfort, now felt heavy and oppressive as tensions rose within our home. My stepfather David's behavior had become increasingly erratic. The man who once took us to Padres games in a gleaming Porsche was now a stranger, his eyes glazed and unfocused, his movements jittery and unpredictable. The acrid smell of something burning often wafted from his study, a scent I would later recognize as the telltale odor of cocaine being smoked. One morning, the facade of our family life shattered completely. I was jolted awake by the sound of raised voices, my mother's urgent tone cutting through the early morning quiet. Stumbling out of bed, my heart racing, I found my brother Mark already in the hallway, his face a mask of concern. We crept down the stairs, the plush carpet muffling our steps. As we reached the bottom, the scene that greeted us burned itself into my memory. Our mother, her face contorted with a mix of fear and anger, confronting David. The air crackled with tension, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, David lunged forward, his hand reaching for my mother's throat. In that moment, the world seemed to slow down. I saw every detail with horrifying clarity. The veins standing out on David's forehead, the look of shock in my mother's eyes, the way the morning sunlight streaming through the windows caught the dust motes swirling in the air, disturbed by the violent movement. Mark sprang into action, pushing past me to intervene. At 15, he was already taller than David, and he used his size to his advantage, shoving our stepfather away from our mother. The sound of bodies colliding, of breath being knocked out of lungs, filled the room.
Michael, call the police.
My mother's voice, high and panicked, cut through the chaos. I ran, my bare feet slapping against the cool tile of the kitchen floor. With shaking hands, I grabbed the phone from its cradle on the wall. But before I could dial, David was there, ripping the phone from my grasp and tearing it from the wall. The crash of the phone hitting the floor felt like a physical blow. In a surge of adrenaline, I bolted out the front door. The normally quiet street was bathed in early morning light, the perfectly manicured lawns and high-end cars, a surreal contrast to the violence I'd just witnessed. Without hesitation, I sprinted to our neighbor's house. I burst through their unlocked door, the normalcy of their quiet kitchen a shock to my system. Ignoring their startled looks, I grabbed their phone, my fingers fumbling as I dialed 911. My stepdad is on drugs and is fighting my mom and brother right now. I blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in my haste to get help. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of flashing lights, stern-faced officers, and hushed conversations. As I watched David being led away in handcuffs, I felt a confusing mix of relief, fear, and a deep, aching sadness for the loss of the family life I had known. Little did I know that this incident, as traumatic as it was only the precursor to an even greater tragedy that would strike our family. In the coming months, on what should have been a day of celebration, our world would be shattered beyond repair. It was the morning of Mark's 16th birthday. The previous day's excitement still lingered in the air as I woke early, eager to surprise him with the gift I had bought him, a new combination hairbrush and comb set, a thoughtful gift from a 10-year-old brother who observed his brother's obsession with making sure his hair looked just right every morning before he left for school. With the wrapped present clutched in my hands, I tiptoed to his room. The house was quiet, still cocooned in the early morning stillness. I knocked softly on Mark's door, then a little louder when there was no response. Slowly, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. "Mark?" I called softly, stepping into the room. The silence that greeted me was oppressive, wrong somehow. The room was dark, and I could barely see him lying in bed, still and unmoving. Something about the way he lay there sent a chill down my spine. I moved closer, the cheerfully wrapped gift now feeling like a lead weight in my hands. "Mark?" I said again, my voice barely a whisper. I reached out to touch his leg. The moment my hand touched his cold skin, and then I noticed all the blood. The world tilted on its axis. Everything. The soft morning light filtering through the curtains, the faint ticking of the clock on the nightstand, the excited pounding of my own heart. All of it froze in that instant of horrifying realization. I don't remember dropping the present, but I must have, because suddenly my hands were free and I ran out of his bedroom. The scream that tore from my throat seemed to come from somewhere else, somewhere outside of me. It echoed through the house, shattering the morning silence and the last remnants of our family's innocence. As my mother came running, I met her in the hallway outside Mark's room. She went inside alone and began screaming. As she exited the room, I followed her downstairs into the kitchen and watched as she picked up the phone on the wall.
David, pick up! Mark's dead! He's dead! Oh my God!
She wailed into the receiver and hung up. She fell to the floor and I curled up next to her, sobbing. After a few minutes, She picked up the phone again and called 911. I didn't understand why she called my stepfather first rather than an ambulance, especially given the recent violent and chaotic events. My mother explained, I didn't want to call the police first because if they were able to save him, he would have been a vegetable. Mark had put the barrel of a 12-gauge shotgun in his mouth and shot himself. My mother's divorce attorney, in a failed attempt to protect our family, lent my mother the gun to protect us in the event of further problems from my stepfather. In that moment, as the reality of what had happened began to sink in, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The idyllic childhood I had known, with its sun-drenched beach days and family dinners overlooking the Pacific, was gone forever. In its place was a new reality, harsh and unforgiving, that I was utterly unprepared to face.